Welcome to my channel. What? Wait. Throughout history, people have gotten really creative when it comes to punishment. But there's a point where creativity crosses a line into just, well, pure cruelty. So today, we're going to dig up some of the most brutal, absolutely terrifying, and just psychologically twisted punishments ever thought up. Let's dive in. So let me ask you, what do you think is the most cruel punishment in history? I mean, really think about it. Well, we're about to count down the top 10 most horrific. And trust me, we're starting with the merely awful and working our way down into pure nightmare fuel. All right, let's begin our little journey into the dark side of justice. All right, here we go. Kicking off our countdown at number 10, this one is designed to prey on one of our most basic, primal fears. So, welcome to the Tower of London's infamous rat dungeon. It's a pretty simple setup really, but terrifyingly effective. See, the cell had this one special feature, a gate that connected right to the River Thames, and it was placed just below the high tide mark. So, when the tide came in, well, so did a whole lot of unwanted guests. Picture this. As the tide starts to rise, the river floods all the rat nests along the bank. And where's the only dry place for them to run? Yup, your cell. And you're in complete darkness. All you can hear is this skittering sound, hundreds of them, getting closer and closer. And then you feel it, tiny bites all over from hungry, panicked, and very angry rats. By coming in at number 9, oh, this one's a classic. A truly infamous device designed for interrogation and just pure pain. We're talking about the rack. You've probably heard of it. It's basically a big wooden frame. They'd chain your wrists and ankles to these rollers at opposite ends, and with every single turn of a handle, the ropes would pull tighter and tighter, literally stretching your body way past its breaking point. And you can see just how systematic it was. First the shoulders and hips, then the knees and elbows. Joints were pulled with so much force you could actually hear them pop out of their sockets. One of the most famous people to suffer this was a woman named Anne Askew. She was only 25, and they stretched her on the rack for her religious beliefs until she was completely paralyzed. And get this, her ordeal wasn't even over. They then had to carry her to be burned at the stake. Okay, for number 8, we're leaving dry land and heading out to the high seas, a place where justice was, let's just say, swift and incredibly brutal. This lovely little punishment is called keel hauling. Basically, if a sailor stepped out of line, they'd get tied to a rope, tossed overboard, and then dragged completely under the ship. I'm talking scraping along the entire length of the massive rough hull, all the way from one side to the other. And there were just so many ways this could end you. I mean, you could drown, obviously. You could get your head bashed in on the keel. Or your skin could be literally sliced to ribbons by all the sharp barnacles stuck to the hull. And hey, even if you somehow miraculously survived all that, you'd probably just die slowly from infection anyway. Or worse, they might just decide to send you for another trip. Coming in at number 7, this is a form of justice delivered by a 4-ton, living, breathing executioner. Yep, you heard that right. Death by elephant. This was a pretty common form of public execution in parts of Asia, and sometimes for crimes that seem kind of minor today, like not paying your taxes. There was even one Mughal emperor who apparently thought it was just great entertainment. He'd order people to be crushed just to cure his boredom. And there wasn't just one way to do it. You had options. There was the quick method, where your head just gets placed on a block and squish, instant. But if the crowd was really in for show, they'd go for the theatrical method. They had elephants trained to slowly crush you one limb at a time, all for the entertainment of the audience. All right, we're at number 6. And this one was all about making a statement. A very, very graphic public statement. We're talking about impalement, and the process itself is just horrific. They take a long wooden stick, often greased to make it easier, about as thick as your arm. Then they drive it into the body with a mallet and hoist the whole thing upright, leaving the victim displayed for everyone to see. A living or dying public service announcement. But believe it or not, there was a real art to the cruelty. See, in one version, they'd just drive the stake straight through a vital organ. Death was pretty quick. But in the much, much more sadistic version, the stake was carefully angled to miss all the vital organs. They even added a little block of wood for the person to kind of sit on, just to make sure their own weight didn't make them slide down and die too quickly. People could be left like that for hours, sometimes even days, in just unimaginable pain. So right about now, you're probably thinking, okay, it can't get any worse than that, right? Oh, you have no idea. Believe me, it is so much worse. Welcome to the top 5. This is where things go from just brutal punishment to pure, calculated psychological torment. Kicking off the top 5, our number 5 entry comes to us from ancient Rome, and it was reserved for a very specific type of crime. It's called poena culiae, which basically means the penalty of the sack. And this was the special punishment for anyone who murdered a member of their own family. The person was sewn up inside a big leather sack, but here's the kicker: they weren't put in there alone. Just to make sure they had some company, they were joined by a dog, a rooster, a viper, and a monkey. Then the whole sack was sewn shut and just chucked into the ocean. Can you even begin to imagine the absolute chaos and sheer terror inside that bag as it sank? All right, for number 4, remember our free little friends from number 10, the rats? Well, they're back. And somehow, this time, it is so much worse. Okay, this one is just vile. So in one method, they'd take a bowl with a live rat inside, strap it to the victim's stomach, and then heat the outside of the bowl. The terrified rat, desperate to escape the heat, would do the only thing it could. It would burrow right through the person's body. And there was another, even more horrifying version that used a tube to, well, let's just say it guided the rat to start burrowing from the person's back door. Our bronze medal for cruelty, coming in at number 3, goes to a punishment where death was just the beginning. The real punishment lasted for years after. This is called gibbeting. It was often used for pirates and notorious criminals. They'd lock a person inside this tight, custom-fit metal cage, shaped just like a human body, and then hang them up in a public square, left completely exposed to the elements, totally unable to move. So death itself would usually take about a week from thirst or exposure. But that was not the end of it. The body was just left there, inside the cage, to rot, in public. It became this grotesque landmark for years, sometimes even decades. I mean, there are actual reports of gibbets staying up with skeletons inside for over 20 years, until people finally got sick of the smell and complained enough to have them taken down. Okay, we're at number 2, the runner-up for the most cruel punishment in history. This one is a specialty from ancient Persia. It's known as scathism, or more simply, the boats. And it basically combines a whole bunch of different tortures into one long, drawn-out nightmare. The ingredients sound almost innocent, really. You just need 2 boats, some milk, some honey, and of course, a victim. Okay, so here's how it worked. First, they'd tie the victim inside a boat. Then, they'd force feed them a mix of milk and honey until they got horrible, horrible diarrhea. After that, they'd smear their entire body in more honey and push them out into a stagnant lake. That sweet, foul mess would attract swarms of insects. The bugs would start to eat the person alive, laying eggs in their flesh. And every single day, they'd bring them more milk and honey to keep the process going, to keep them alive and suffering for as long as humanly possible. And this was not a quick death. We have an account from a writer that says one man survived this for 17 days. Can you imagine? 17 days of your flesh rotting away while you're being eaten alive from the inside out by worms and parasites. And here we are, number 1, the top of our list. This is, arguably, the most cruel and psychologically devastating punishment ever invented. It's called the oubliette. The name comes from the French word oublier, which means to forget. And that is exactly what this punishment was all about. It wasn't about a public spectacle. It was about throwing someone away and making the world completely, utterly forget they ever even existed. Just try to imagine this. You're dropped into a pit so narrow you can't sit down, you can't lie down, you can't even stand up straight. It's pitch black. Your only company? The rotting corpses and skeletons of the people who were thrown in before you. And of course, the rats that have been feeding on them. I mean, when workers were clearing out an oubliette at Leap Castle in Ireland, they found so many human skeletons they needed 3 full carts to haul them all away. See, this punishment wasn't about physical pain. It was about the absolute psychological horror of being erased, of being totally and completely forgot. Whew. So, after that pretty grim journey, what's the takeaway from all this? What does this tell us about the dark side of justice? Well, what seems pretty clear is that for a huge chunk of history, the goal wasn't really justice or even stopping other people from committing crimes. It was about inflicting the absolute maximum amount of pain, both physical and psychological. It was often a form of public theater. With that line between justice and just pure sadism, it got completely erased. And it really leaves you with a pretty killing question, doesn't it? At what point does punishment stop being about justice and just become cruelty for its own sake? And maybe more importantly, where do we draw that line today? Something to chew on. Thanks for joining me. Goodbye. See you in the next video.